Hello, 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 everyone. I am Dr. Shernette Grant, and I want to welcome you back to another episode of Leadership Plus with Dr. G. This is the podcast where we keep it real about what it takes to lead, grow, and inspire others to be their absolute best. And I am so delighted I get to be your host. Of course, I'm always grateful that you took the time out or you're taking the time out to tune in. And I want to encourage you to always like, subscribe, and most importantly, share with someone whom you know could benefit from these insights. Leadership Plus with Dr. G is available on all of your streaming platforms or many of your streaming platforms: Apple, iHeart, Castbox, Spotify, YouTube. So be sure to check that out. In today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about the uncertainties of leadership or the uncertainties in leading, rather, and some of the strategies that as leaders you can use to make sure that you can get through these tough times. Things are rough out here. Things are tough out here. And uncertainty is probably the only constant that we can absolutely rely on. There's going to be uncertainty in leadership. There are market shifts, policy changes, industries are evolving, the political landscape. And of course, when uncertainty strikes, I'm telling you, it's the leaders who have to step up. It's not going to be the politicians. It's not the board members. It's not the shareholders. But it is the leaders who become the guiding force that determine whether or not an organization crumbles or thrives. That is a fact. And I hope as leaders, as you're listening, you are embracing that responsibility, that role, and the accountability to keep the organization thriving as part of your responsibility. Right now, we're seeing so much play out. And one example, because it's on the table this week, is the dissolution of the Department of Education, right? Regardless of where you stand on this issue, this moment highlights a universal truth that we all know, right? Leaders across industries must know how to lead when the ground beneath them starts to shift. And this is one example. So in today's episode, we're going to discuss how leaders across all industries can steady their teams, communicate with confidence, and turn uncertainty into opportunities for growth. So whether you are leading a school, a corporation, a nonprofit, a startup, these strategies will definitely help you keep your people focused, keep them engaged, and increase their resilience. So by the end of this episode, I hope you will walk away with some practical strategies for stabilizing your team in these times of change or any time of change, and communicating tactics that will build trust in uncertain times. And also you'll hear about how some real world leaders have navigated some crises successfully in the past. So let's dive in. So whether you want to grab your coffee, your tea, or whatever it is that fuels your greatness, I want you to go ahead, grab that, and let's dive in. So have you ever wondered why uncertainty feels so threatening? It is certainly frustrating, and it's usually biologically upsetting. Some of us get physically ill when it comes to dealing with the uncertainties. When people lack information about the future, what happens is that the brain fills in the gaps. And usually the brain is often thinking about all the worst case scenarios, even when it's not the truth, right? So if you don't have the information and there's a gap, there's a void, the brain kicks in and the brain will start to fill up with all kinds of worst case scenario. And this is why your staff may get disengaged. This is why morale may drop. This is why the team may start resisting change, because they simply don't know. They simply don't know. The good news, however, is that great leaders don't need to worry about eliminating uncertainty. What they need to do is to provide clarity and confidence amid it, right? It is not uncertainty. Uncertainty is inevitable. It's going to happen. Things are going to happen. But as a leader, it is your responsibility to provide clarity and to help the team feel confident that regardless of what the unknowns are, regardless of where we're headed, they can be confident that we'll get through this, and we will get through this with flying colors. You remember the 2008 financial crisis, right? The Great Recession, it feels like. Businesses, nonprofits, government agencies, they faced massive layoffs. Budgets were plummeting. There's a lot of economic panic. A lot of people lost their retirement incomes, their retirement savings, their investment portfolios plummeted during that time. And companies, however, that communicated openly, gave their teams clear short-term action steps, those are the companies who were able to retain their people. Starbucks, for example, we talked about Starbucks before. They focused on employee engagement rather than cost cutting alone, ensuring their culture stayed intact even during the financial turmoil. So while you're still dealing with all the chaos around you, it is important that you are focusing on making sure that your employees stay healthy, that they can thrive amid the crisis and the chaos, and that as a leader, you are creating those structures for them to do so. So leaders, in uncertain times such as these, people don't always need all the answers. Right? They don't always need all the answers, but what they need is to trust that their leader has a plan. They may not know what the answer is, and they don't really need it, but what they want to do is be able to look at you confidently as the leader and know that you have a plan that also considers them. Here are some of the simple things you can do when you're getting ready to start your meetings with your team. Start out with one of the threes that I'm about to share with you. Talk about what we know right now. Be very transparent and open. Here's what we know right now. Right? Let's talk about it together. Here's what we know to be true. Remember we said, right? If they don't know, they start to fill their brains with all kinds of things. And if you haven't provided them an alternative solution to all of what they are putting in their brains and filling in the gaps with, the worst case scenarios, it is up to you to say, here's what we really know. Here are the truths. Here are the things that we know to be true, and you start there. Then you can share with your staff, here's what we're working on. So because we know this, here are the things that we're working on. And some of those things may be working on some of the unknowns, the things without answers, the struggles, the challenges. It could be just being very transparent, being very open, and communicating about those things. And then the third thing you want to talk to your team about is, here are the things that we can control. Right? This is where the serenity prayer comes in. I will not attempt to say it because every time I say the serenity prayer, I mess it up. But what I do know is that what it says is, help us to work on the things that we can control and the things we can't, right? We have to have the wisdom to know that. So 3 things as leaders. Start your meeting or your public addresses with your essential stakeholders. Here's what we know right now. Here are the facts on the table. Here are the things that we're addressing, the things that we're working on. And here are the things that we can control, right? So we can work on eliminating the unknowns or eliminating the guesswork for the people. And they can trust, again, that you, their leader, have a plan to get them through these times of uncertainty. The next thing that uncertainty does, because we already know why it feels so threatening, right? It can be biologically upsetting and it makes you sick to the stomach. We know that it is important as leaders also to create stability during uncertain times, right? Sounds unclear? It's important for us as leaders to create stability in uncertain times. When industries start to shift, organizations are looking for anchors. They're looking for that one thing that's going to keep the organization grounded and stable. And if you're in a leadership role, you are a part of that anchor structure. You must be that anchor. You have to help create a sense of stability even when the external landscape around you is in flux. Even when the changes are happening and things are so dynamic, you as a leader must create a sense of stability. It's important for you to reaffirm for your team your core mission, and your core values. Your industry may shift, but your mission remains the same. And it's important to always bring your team back to that. No matter what's happening, the industry may be shifting. There may be different ways we have to do the work that we do, but the why behind the work and what we are determined to do as an organization to serve those we serve does not change. It remains the same. So amid airline bankruptcies in the 2000s, Southwest stayed profitable by increasing laser focused on their mission. They were all focused on low cost and customer focused services. That's what Southwest did. Now I hear that they're about to charge for bags. I'm not sure how. Again, talk about changes, right? Southwest is the one airline you could rely on for getting on and know you had your two pieces of luggage, your carry-on. Now I hear that's about to change. But again, going through another period of change. But I guarantee you they're going to remain focused on customer service because that's what they do. It's a part of their mission. So whether you're in education, in business, in health, tech, no matter what you're in, transportation, you make it clear that the work we do still matters no matter what changes, especially right now in education. No matter what happens at the Department of Education, we still do what we do in education. We educate, we teach. We change the lives of children. And we have to stay focused on what that is. So those are the things that you use to help create stability. The other thing that you focus on is making sure to highlight the things that will stay the same. So while you're dealing with the things that are changing, you want to make sure that you're highlighting for your team and reminding them that while things are changing, right? Remind your team of the things that aren't. People love constants. They love to know where the stability is, right? So while things are changing, be sure to point out and remind individuals or members of the team of the things that aren't changing. I mentioned the DOE's potential dissolution. That might change federal policies, but schools are still going to teach. Schools will still be changing the lives of young people. Similarly, if a company restructures, customers will still need service. No matter what happens, they might be going through tons of restructuring, but at the end of the day, customers still need the goods and services that they deliver. If a nonprofit loses a major grant, the community still needs impact. The community still needs that nonprofit to come in and do the amazing work that they do that aligns to their mission. So leaders, here's the takeaway for you. Organizations that focus on their constants rather than always obsessing about the changes, you can help to create a sense of security even amid the transformation, right? Don't stay focused or obsessed to being crippled about the changes. Focus on your constants and the things that don't change and continue to rally the team and the individuals and your stakeholders around that constant, which typically and in many cases really just aligns to the mission of the organization. Create a 3-point stability statement for your team, right? I'll give you an example. Example number 1, regardless of external changes or commitment to fill in the blank remains the same. That's one example. We just talked about while there are changes happening to still highlight, emphasize the things that are remaining the same. So regardless of external changes or internal changes or commitment to X remains. That's one example of a stability statement. Another example, we will adapt, but we will not abandon our mission. See how simple that sounds? But you have to act it out also. We will adapt. In other words, we're acknowledging. The first point was to acknowledge that change is happening. You can't ignore it. And make sure that you are verbalizing that you recognize that. So we will adapt, but we're not abandoning our mission. And the third one, here's what's not changing in how we serve our people. And you point those things out. You highlight those things. You verbalize those things. You help the team. Let them come up with with the X's and the blanks in these statements. Let them be the ones to really internalize and verbalize what that is. Get into a room, write it on the wall, right? Make an activity out of it. Make a fun activity out of it to remind individuals that you serve, the individuals that you lead, that while change is happening, the important thing is that we will remain stable for X reason, and here are the reasons, and here are the things that will remain the same, even though we continue to embrace the change. The third thing I want to talk about is the power of transparency. Power of transparent communication, especially in uncertainty. Silence breeds fear. Communication builds confidence. Let me say that again. Silence breeds fear. The first thing we talked about was when people don't know what's happening, what they do is they start to think of all kinds of crazy things in their own brains and start filling in the gaps with what they think is supposed to happen. Silence breeds fear and confusion. Communication builds confidence. In times of uncertainty, rumors will fill the void if leaders don't step up. If you don't control the narrative, someone else is going to control it for you. And oftentimes it is to your detriment or to the detriment of the organization or the work. Don't allow rumors to fill the void. Go ahead and be the one to communicate that. COVID-19 was a perfect example. Companies that provided weekly updates kept employees engaged. Schools that had clear reopening plans, even if they changed later, had higher parent confidence. The worst responses could be vague communication, vague emails with no details, leaving people confused and stressed out. That's the worst thing that you could do. So remember, communicate clearly, communicate confidently, and communicate often, because silence is going to destroy the organization, the people. And remember, I told you, this on dealing with uncertainty is it creates a biological response. And sometimes you wonder why your people are always sick. Genuinely, some of them are sick. They're sick to their stomachs because they don't know what is happening in these times of uncertainty. So as a leader, it's important for you to do that. Calm the fears, communicate clearly, because silence will breed that. So leaders, here are your takeaway. Even if you don't have all the answers, you don't always have to have all the answers. We all talked about that. It's not about having all the answers. It's being transparent about what you have and what you don't have. We don't know everything yet, but here's what we do know. Remember, we talked about those things before. We don't know this, but here's what we do know. Here's how we're preparing, and here's when you can expect some more updates. Don't leave the people hanging. Don't leave them hanging. Give them something to expect. Give them a deadline to expect. Let them know that you will circle back in a week, 2 days, a month, whatever that looks like. And admit that, yes, I'm going through the change myself. I don't have all the answers myself, but here are the things that I do know. And as soon as I know, I'm going to make sure you know as well. Here's how we're preparing for the plan A, the plan B, and the plan C, and we will be pivoting and adjusting as we go along, but I'm making sure that you are staying abreast just like I would want you to. Okay? So it's important for you as a leader to set that cadence of communication, whether it's weekly, bi-weekly updates for staff or stakeholders, monthly briefings, whatever that looks like for your board members, your partners, your investors, public forums if it is appropriate. Whatever that looks like, when you're going through it and when you're going through times of uncertainty, it's important that you are very deliberate about those action steps. Very deliberate. So we know that uncertainty can feel very threatening, very unsettling, to the point where it can be biologically upsetting. We know that it is important for you to create stability even in the unstable times. And the way to do that is to focus also on the things that you do know, focus on the things that remain constant despite the changes that are happening. And focus, more importantly, on being transparent about your communication so that you can keep all your stakeholders abreast of what is happening and how you are dealing with it. Finally, I want to talk about leading with emotional intelligence. Uncertainty is emotional. Leaders who acknowledge this will have stronger, more engaged teams. It is important for you to recognize the stress your team is under. It's important for you to validate their concerns. Don't ignore them. Don't add to it. Don't be the reason for that stress. It's important that while you validate the concerns, however, you don't dwell on the panic. You don't dwell on the frustrations. You want to focus on team resilience. You want to be the model of confidence. Even if you yourself are feeling uncertain, your team should not know that. Agile, emotionally intelligent leaders know that it's important to be in touch and in sync with their teams, their emotions, their concerns, because it is up to you to make sure that you are building the kind of resilient team that you will need to survive these times of uncertainties. It happens all the time. We have had a history of disasters in this country, in this world, and organizations and companies and schools that survived and came out glowing are those that had to reassure their teams amid all kinds of panic that it's going to be okay. And it is leaders who are in tune with the emotions of their staff that are the ones that could fight through. The best leaders balance empathy with forward-thinking action. You cannot stay in an emotional space, but you have to be empathetic and you have to balance that with action. What now? We acknowledge, we recognize, right? Here are some tools and some, strategies to help you get through this time of stress and frustration. But how do we get past this? They're not dismissing the emotions, but they're also not going to let the fear just dictate the strategy, right? So it's important for you to balance empathy with forward-thinking action that is driven highly by agile thinking and emotional intelligence. Leaders host huddles where managers can share their concerns and strategies to support their teams. Very simple tip. We often assume that because individuals are in positions of leadership where they're the ones who are supporting their team or they have direct reports, that they're supposed to figure it out. No, a good leader creates the space and the space for even those who are leading and for your managers to share their concerns and to think through strategies that will be helpful for the entire team. In times of uncertainty, great leaders acknowledge the fear, but they don't dwell on it. Remember that. You have to acknowledge it, but you don't dwell on it. Forward thinking, okay? You want to reinforce the uncertainty with stability. Reinforce what's stable. While you're acknowledging the things that you are not sure about, the things that are uncertain, the things you can't even at any particular time make an assessment of how you're moving forward, you want to recognize and acknowledge for your team the things that have stayed the same. Usually they're around your purpose, right? Around your values, around the work you do and the people you serve and the difference you're making. It's important that you communicate with clarity and consistency. Clarity, consistency. And it's important that you communicate often. Establish a cadence of communication that individuals can expect. And when you do so, make sure you honor that. Lead with emotional intelligence. Lead with emotional intelligence. Be in touch with your team's emotions. But remember, you are going to balance emotion and empathy with forward-thinking action. We're not going to stay in a space of fear and emotionality. And then it's also important for you to adapt. Agile. Be agile. Anticipate the change rather than react to it. Great leaders understand how to anticipate the change before it even comes. Always be thinking about what your response is going to be. So you're going to adapt, anticipate the change, rather than being in a reactive space where now all you're doing is responding after you've been caught off guard. Right? I'm going to recap those real quickly. In times of uncertainty, great leaders acknowledge the fear, but they don't dwell on it. They reinforce stability. They reinforce what's stable, because that gives people a sense of comfort, a sense of calm. They communicate often, clearly and consistently. They lead with emotional intelligence. They're agile, adaptable, and they anticipate change rather than react to it. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. We are going through some tough times in this country, in this world, in our districts and profit. We are going through some tough times. We know this. But this too is just another phase in this race that we call life and work. And together we can get through it. So that's all for today's episode of Leadership Plus with Dr. G. If this resonated with you, I want you to please share this with another leader who needs guidance during uncertain times such as these. There's somebody in your circle that you know who could benefit from these insights. And don't forget to follow, subscribe, connect with me on social media. If you if you would like to learn more about the work we do with Unorthodox Leadership Consulting, visit our website at www.unorthodoxleadership.org. We'd be happy to connect, to work with you, to help you through these very uncertain times. So until next time, keep leading boldly, because the world needs strong leaders more now than they ever did. Ciao.